My father didn't raise his voice when he said it. That was the part that stung the most. We were standing in the doorway between the dining room and the hallway, the kind of late afternoon light spilling across the hardwood that makes everything look softer than it feels. Dust floated lazily in the sunbeams like it had nowhere important to be. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and something older, like the fading memory of last night's dinner still lingering in the air. Dad didn't look at me when he spoke. He just kept flipping through the stack of legal papers the attorney had left on the table, his wedding ring tapping the corner rhythmically. "Your uncle deserves it," he said. No hesitation. No blink. Just a sentence dropped into the room like a stone into still water. I remember gripping the back of a chair, my fingers pressing into the worn fabric as if the texture itself could anchor me. That chair had been in the family for decades. My grandmother's, then my mother's, then everyone's. The kind of object that carried arguments and laughter equally well. And now it carried me too while I pretended my heart wasn't slipping sideways in my chest. My name is Marissa Lane. I'm 32 years old, and a month before everything collapsed, my parents handed the house, the company, and every family asset to my uncle because, in my father's words, he deserved it. What they didn't expect was how quickly the weight of that decision would come back to them. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts. It means more than you know. My uncle wasn't a bad man, not in the sharp, malicious way some relatives are. But he was careless with people the way someone is careless with receipts or old envelopes. Not out of cruelty, just convenience. He'd spent his entire life drifting between jobs until my father pulled him into the family company out of pity. Or loyalty. Or maybe habit. My father always treated responsibility like a family heirloom, something passed down whether you wanted it or not. But when the will revisions were finally done, when the attorney folded the documents neatly into his briefcase and my father clasped his shoulder like the decision had been a noble one, I realized something with a clarity that felt almost surgical. They hadn't even considered me. Not as an heir. Not as a partner. Not even as a possibility. I stood there, the afternoon humming around us, the quiet tick of the wall clock, the faint whoosh of a car passing outside, the soft clink of dishes being put away in the kitchen, and felt something in my chest shift. Something old. Something tired. My mother walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of coffee. The steam curled upward in thin ribbons that smelled like burnt caramel. She set both cups in front of Dad and my uncle but didn't make one for me. She didn't even seem to notice the omission. She had always moved around men like they were orbit points and she was simply trying not to collide. "We did the right thing," she said softly. "He's family. So was I. But some families draw their definitions in ink and some in invisible ink." I excused myself before my voice betrayed me. As I walked toward my old bedroom, now a storage space filled with suitcases, unopened boxes, and the ghost of my teenage years, I felt a memory tug at me, quiet as a draft sneaking under a door. I was 16. My father had taken my brother and me to a hardware store for lumber. On the drive home, my brother spilled a soda all over the truck's cloth seats. Dad barely reacted, just laughed, ruffled his hair, told him, "Accidents happen." A week later, when I accidentally scratched the side of the truck with my backpack buckle, Dad had stood silent for almost a full minute before saying, "Why don't you ever think?" The contrast between those two reactions lived inside me for years like mismatched bookends on a shelf, holding up everything I didn't want to examine. When I reached my room, the air felt colder, still carrying the faint smell of cardboard and old carpet. A sliver of light crept across the floor through the blinds, catching dust mites mid-float. I sat on the edge of the old twin bed and let my shoulders fall forward. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger is sharp. Cling. Fast. What I felt was quieter, like standing waist-deep in cold water, unable to tell if your body is shivering or simply adjusting. Over the next few weeks, everything changed fast. My uncle moved into the house across town, the one my grandparents built with their own hands, the one with the sycamore tree whose roots cracked the driveway in slow, beautiful fractures. He took over the company too, though "took over" implies more effort than he actually gave. Mostly he delegated. Or avoided. Or disappeared for long lunches while half the staff tried to guess his new office schedule. Meanwhile, I kept working quietly from my corner desk in the finance department. I'd been with the company 7 years. Long enough to know which drawers squeaked, which employees cried in the supply room when no one was watching, and which decisions would crumble the foundation if pushed too far. I also knew, long before the rest of them, that my uncle had no idea how to run any of it. A memory surfaced one night while I was reviewing invoices. I remembered my grandfather teaching me how to balance the ledger books when I was 11, the room smelling of pencil shavings and pipe tobacco. His hands were steady, his voice soft. Numbers are honest, Marissa. They won't flatter you and they won't lie. They just show you where the cracks are. He had no idea his words would one day become a prophecy. Because the cracks were everywhere. By the end of that month, the company was already in mild disarray. Vendors weren't being paid on time. My uncle misplaced contracts. He promoted a friend to a role requiring certifications he didn't have. He approved a purchase order so large it nearly wiped out our quarterly budget. And still, my father praised him. He'll learn, Dad insisted. He deserves this chance. Deserve. That word had begun to sour in my mouth. By the time the mortgage text arrived, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was. Mom's message lit up my phone screen just past 9 p.m., the room lit only by the glow of my desk lamp. Mortgages due. No greeting. No question. Just an expectation as automatic as breathing. I stared at the message for a long time. A memory slid into focus. Mom at the kitchen table during my childhood, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug, whispering to my father, "We'll figure it out. Marissa always finds a way." I used to think it was praise. Now I knew it was dependence disguised as affection. This time I didn't soften anything. I typed back, "Ask your heir." Then I set the phone face down on the table. The silence that followed, 8 minutes long uninterrupted, felt like the first breath of a life I had never been allowed to choose before. And somewhere in that quiet, the story that would unravel everything truly began. When my mother didn't reply, I thought maybe she was busy or stunned, or simply refusing to acknowledge what I'd just said. Silence was her preferred strategy. She treated it like a warm coat, something to slip into whenever the world felt too cold. But 10 minutes later my phone buzzed again. This time a single line. "Marissa, don't be like this." The familiar tug of responsibility pinched my ribs. They always said that when they needed something, when duty should outweigh dignity, when loyalty should eclipse boundaries, when the child they'd sidelined was expected to fill the cracks in the walls they'd built themselves. But something in me had shifted. Permanently. Finally. Like a thread finally snapping after years of strain. I didn't reply. I powered off the phone. And for the first time that month, the night felt quiet in a way that didn't suffocate me. I lay back on my bed, my lamp casting a warm amber glow across the walls. The faint smell of laundry detergent clung to the sheets, mingling with the cool breeze slipping through my cracked window. In the distance a dog barked twice. Then the world settled. A memory rose, one I hadn't touched in years. I was maybe 13, curled on the basement floor during a storm. The thunder was violent that night, rolling through the house with a force that rattled picture frames. My father stood at the foot of the stairs with my brother, his hand on his shoulder. "We protect what's worth protecting," he told him. I'd looked up, waiting for him to notice me. He didn't. He never did in those moments. Tonight, lying in the dim quiet, that memory didn't hurt the same way. It felt like a page from a book I'd finally stopped pretending was still being written. The next morning, everything came undone. I arrived at the office to find the lobby buzzing with a quiet panic. The kind that spreads before anyone has the courage to say what's actually wrong. Phones ringing off rhythm. Employees huddled in small, tight circles. A jittery receptionist whispering into her headset. When she saw me, her shoulders dropped in relief. "Oh, thank God," she exhaled. "Marissa, you need to see this." She handed me a stack of papers. Overdue vendor balances, declined payments, a bank warning notice, and at the top, almost mocking in its bold lettering, a negative financial projection sheet. My uncle had burned through nearly half the company's cash reserves. How? I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer. "He approved a luxury equipment order for a client that doesn't exist," she whispered. "He said it was a business expansion. But the bank flagged it, because no such client has ever been recorded in our system." The air felt thinner. The hallway lights buzzed overhead, flickering in that pale corporate way that always made people look more tired than they were. I headed toward my uncle's office, heels clicking sharply against the tile. But he wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere. His computer was off, his chair slightly angled as if someone had stood up too quickly. A half-empty coffee sat on the desk, cold. A faint smell of stale cinnamon from the bakery across the street drifted through the cracked window. The receptionist appeared in the doorway, pale. "He left," she whispered. "He took the company car and said he needed air. That was 2 hours ago." My phone finally powered back on. Buzzed. 4 missed calls. 2 messages. The first was short. "We need your help." The second was longer, as if panic had loosened her restraint. "Your uncle isn't answering. Your father is furious. The mortgage is overdue. The company accountant says the accounts are frozen. Please come talk to us. Please." I stared at the screen, the morning sun catching its surface and turning it into a small, trembling mirror. My own reflection looked steadier than I expected. This was the moment I realized something profound. They didn't want me, but they needed me. And those are not the same thing. I walked out of the office and drove to my parents' house. The neighborhood looked unchanged. The trimmed hedges, the cracked sidewalk, the mailbox that always leaned slightly right. But I felt different walking up the steps. Older. Cleaner inside. Less afraid of the quiet. Dad opened the door before I knocked. His face looked carved from worry, deep lines forming where certainty used to live. He stepped aside wordlessly, the smell of burnt toast drifting from the kitchen. Mom stood near the counter, wringing a dish towel, the same nervous habit she had during every argument I could remember. Dad didn't ease into the conversation. "Your uncle made mistakes," he said, voice stiff. "We didn't foresee this." No apology. Just an inconvenience framed as a surprise. Mom added, "We just need your help getting everything back on track. You're good with these things." Good with these things. As if my competence was a pantry item they could reach for whenever the shelf above them collapsed. I walked to the center of the kitchen, touched the cool counter, and let the silence fill the room. The refrigerator hummed, a car drove by outside, and somewhere in the distance a lawn mower started up. Finally I said, "No." It wasn't loud. It didn't shake. It didn't need to. My father blinked, like the word had never been used on him before. My mother swallowed, her lips parting as if to negotiate. But I didn't give her the space. "You chose your heir," I said softly. "Ask him." Mom's eyes glistened. Dad's jaw tightened. A long exhale seeped into the space between us, thin, trembling, almost tired. Then came the words I never expected to hear. "We shouldn't have done this," Mom whispered. "We didn't think you'd ever leave." The truth settled on the tile floor like dust illuminated in a sunbeam. They didn't expect me to leave because they never expected me to matter enough. I stepped back, picked up my purse, and headed for the door. My father called my name once, just once, but something in his voice sounded less like authority and more like fear. Outside the air felt fresh. Clean. The morning breeze carried the smell of cut grass and a hint of gasoline. A neighbor waved. A bird landed on the fence. Life moved without waiting for them. And for the first time in years I felt the world open rather than narrow. If you've lived anything like this, tell your story, and don't forget to subscribe. I walked down the driveway, sunlight warming the back of my neck, and understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Sometimes the inheritance you're denied becomes the freedom you never would have claimed. We rise when we finally refuse.